Welcome to another true beginner's guide featuring a lovely man or woman with a machine gun this time. First thing to note is that you cannot access this job before reaching level 50 and unlocking the prime Heavensward content by venturing to Ishgard. So by the time of creating this video you have to start off with another job first, get to level 50, unlock the MSQ until reaching that capital city, and start with the job quest to be reduced to level 30 again. But don't worry, it is worth it not only for the many machinists the Final Fantasy series has to offer, but also for the battle system, so let's take a closer look to it. Your standard rotation works based on 3 attacks: Split Shot, Slug Shot and Clean Shot, that you should rotate in this order. Those will turn into stronger versions later on. The best thing about the Machinist though are its OGCDs, off-global cooldown abilities, which are skills or attacks that don't trigger a global recast timer of basically 2.5 seconds. But therefore can be used inside of that triggered recast timer, that a weapon skill like Split, Slug or Clean Shot for example would trigger. Your main and simple damage OGCDs are Gauss Round, learned at level 15, or Ricochet on level 50, that also has a small cleaving potential, hitting targets around your main target. While in usual fights or hunting down mobs in the open world, you should use those OGCDs whenever they're ready. And of course when you have started a global recast timer with your main attacks already. But for raid fights within an 8-man raid party, try to stick to group buffed windows to use your stacks of Gauss Round and Ricochet. But of course, when talking about Ricochet and Gauss Round, we have to also talk about Hypercharge, learned at level 30. This ability grants you access to Heat Blast on level 35 that may look weaker than your standard rotation on the first look, but actually it is way stronger, because it can be used causing a much shorter global recast timer of basically 1.5 seconds, so you have a much faster attack rate when you use Heat Blast over the other weapon skills. And accompanied with each Heat Blast, this reduces the remaining cooldown of your Gauss Round and Ricochet by 15 seconds. And as both are starting with 2 charges already and the frequency of Heat Blasting is very quick, you should throw in a single Gauss Round or Ricochet after each Heat Blast, according to the higher stack or cooldown on either Ricochet or Gauss Round, so that you don't waste the cooldown reduction potential that counts for both skills at the same time. And how can we use Hypercharge? By filling up your heat gauge, that is filled up by nearly all of your attacks, and by the OGCD Barrel Stabilizer, learned on level 66, that directly provides a full use of Hypercharge. And surely, this stands in close relation to our Wildfire, as these attacks will place an effect upon your target that is empowered by each weapon attack you land under its duration. Note that this only counts for skills that cause a recast timer, not abilities like Gauss Round and Ricochet for example. Yes, you're right, as our Hypercharge phase grants us access to Heat Blast, that causes a shorter recast timer than our usual weapon skills, we want to use Wildfire and Hypercharge in combination, to harvest the last bit of power from Wildfire. And you know what, that is actually everything you need to know. Maybe go through the last part a second time, because this is what is required to land heavy DPS numbers in your raid setup, or at least the section that separates a technician from the man with the machine gun. Above that, we also have some big boom bang abilities that I want to talk about shortly. Drill, learned at level 58, is the prime example for this. But your usual hotshot that also increases your battery gauge by 20, more to that later, will turn into Air Anchor on level 76. Being on the same 700 potency level like your drill, so damage goes with both of them. In a sweet combination, you also have Reassemble that is already learned at level 10, that causes your next weapon skill to be a guaranteed critical direct hit, and until level 58 you always want to use it with the strongest weapon skill you have, that is mostly Clean Shot. At 58 you always save this for your drill attack, and when Air Anchor is learned you can use it for any of the 2. So make sure that your cooldown of Reassemble always fits to one cooldown of either Drill or Air Anchor, while not delaying both for too long. Most openers will take care of that matter, so check out my comprehensive guide for further info. Last but not least, you cannot create a Machinist in a Japanese MMO without having access to max or maglite units. So the first of these is Rook Auto Turret, that summons a turret at your target's position to shot at enemies. And if you don't use Rook Overdrive manually, which is kinda the self-destruction button, it will do that automatically before shutting down after 15 seconds. These 15 seconds duration can also be exceeded by filling up your battery gauge above the required 50 to summon your turret. So make wise decisions where to use it or when to save more battery gauge points. By the way, those battery gauge points are being generated by your hotshot or Air Anchor respectively, or by using your Clean Shot as the third attack of your standard combo. You were talking about mechs, but that is only a turret. Yes, on level 80 this will transform into the Automaton Queen, which transforms the turret into a mech that also is stronger, and the attacks being delivered are visually amplified, so that you can also feel them better. Here the same procedure is applied. The more battery gauge you have, the longer is its duration, and it will destroy itself before despawning automatically or when hitting up Queen Overdrive, so try to use this during well buffed raid timings. On the AoE department, the Machinist is kinda straightforward, using your spread shot instead of your standard rotation when there are 3 or more targets on high levels, when you have learned your heated attacks, and on low levels using it against 2 targets is already beneficial. Hypercharge now is used for unlocking auto crossbow on level 52 when you have 3 or more targets. Otherwise, stick to normal heat blasts plus ricochet and gauss round assault. On 72 you learn Bio Blaster that should be used instead of Drill. With that it shares a recast timer, at least when you have 3 or more targets. And Flamethrower not only being Mr. Happy's coffee button, this is also being used when the former skills are on cooldown or your heat gauge has been spent already, because it is stronger than your standard spread shot and allows you to take a break for a well-earned cup of coffee. While your character is channeling this gunfiery inferno. Okay, so much for the offensive. As still being put to the bracket of ranged supporter jobs, let us talk about the Machinist's supporting power, which is Tactician and some role commands. Tactician simply mitigates damage your raid receives by 10% and for 15 seconds. Use it wisely for raid damage or when individual party members need more mitigation than they could get from other sources alone. The role commands are more like gimmicks than actual gameplay elements. Paladin makes your group faster as long as you're not in combat, but sprint is better still. While foot and leg grace kinda hinder movement of the target, that doesn't work on bosses. Granting only space for usage for them is when pulling mobs in dungeons and you want to crowd control one of them, that actually nobody does in this game. Second Wind on the other hand grants yourself some HP and works like a small potion that can be useful after being hit by big waves of raid damage, while Arm's Length simply is being used to avoid pull or knockback mechanics. And Head Gray's field of usefulness is very limited, as most attacks cannot be silenced, but in those situations where they can, most tanks will take the lead of doing it. So when you're going to use this attack depends on your group strategy. And that's it. I hope this guide could offer a solid foundation for getting started as Machinist, and if that is the case and you want to reassemble your knowledge and hypercharge your wisdom, check out my comprehensive guide to learn about certain rotations or gear choices as well. So far, thanks a lot for checking out this video, and especially for those of you that still watch this video even if they are not really interested in the job or have seen my other Machinist guides already. You are the best and keep up your greatness. Until next time, check out my second channel for Shadowlands content or other videos on this channel for all sorts of Final Fantasy content. Stay safe, stay healthy, and keep loving Final Fantasy. Yeah.